Good afternoon and hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the culture. We're so excited to have you join us again every Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. We hope that your summer is going well. And thank you for sharing your thoughts, sharing the broadcast, letting others know about this place with two legal experts that are helping to navigate this world that we're seeing. My name is Dr. Stacey N.C. Graham. Welcome to the show. I am off location today. So just bear with me as we go through a engaging conversation, some updates, some of the things that we see happening, and some explanations that can be helpful to you as you navigate what criminal justice looks like in a couple of different areas. But before we get started with that, let's say hello to our two legal experts. Señor Edward Pichardo, ¿cómo está?
Muy bien. Buenas tardes, todos ustedes. How are you today? Welcome. Good afternoon, Ed Pichardo, Esquire. Thank you for viewing our show today. As usual, I believe you'll find it educational as well as fulfilling. I think it's going to be an interesting discussion this afternoon.
Awesome. Thank you. And hey, Jason, we see you tuning in. And over to you, Mr. Royce Russell, Esquire.
I'm just going to make this disclaimer right here. Please do not trademark Ed's favorite phrase that he says on the show. That is his only, all right? We're coming out with shirts soon. So biters stop biting, you know what I mean? As they say, what's the word, Johannesburg? Welcome to the day, and let's get it on and popping and educating our people in our community in the law and what's in the news, where the cultural meets the legal and the legal meets the cultural. Let's get it cooking.
Yes. Hey, Maria. Thank you as well for tuning in and being a part of the show. So last week we went over a few things. And of course, we always acknowledge when we have ancestors that are known nationally, globally, and acknowledging them. And then we started talking about immigration. There's a lot going on. We're always at the cutting edge of what's happening. And we broke down, and Mr. Russell went into some great detail around what we should be looking at when this particular topic, which will garner a lot of attention. Hey, Reginald, thank you for tuning in as well. Will garner a lot of attention. There's some key things that our legal experts want us to really just be knowledgeable about. So let's talk about that a little bit. Mr. Russell, over to you. And hey, John, how are you?
Hey, let me just say what's up to Reg. I see him out there. I'm gonna tell us a funny story before this set is over, Reg. So you stay tuned. We always got something in the pocket, especially for our listeners and watchers. The reason why I wanted to revisit the immigration scenario or fact finders as we went through last week is because now we see Cuban Americans and Cubans from Cuba in the news articulating wanting their independence. And for those who are, either legal permanent residents or are here illegally or have green cards and they're looking to stabilize themselves in America, I think it's important to note that when you have these struggles in other countries, then that just make those immigrants that are now in America want the current presidency to push that agenda up, push the immigration agenda up. When you look at the things that this president has said that he wants to tackle, COVID, he's doing that. The voting right, he is actively engaged in that, and we'll talk about that later on. And immigration, which is left on the plate. So I thought it would be informative from a legal standpoint and from a cultural standpoint to revisit some of the things that the president is trying to do with the United States Citizen Act of 2021. So at times you're going to see me bow my head because I want to make sure that I get the facts out straight so we can have this discussion. I think one of the things that, and Ed, feel free to interrupt me, Dr. Grant, whenever you want to, but I want to make sure that the information is out there because I think this act is something that people are not really watching, right? Insiders are watching the inside pitch, and we know that there always will be compromises when certain laws and acts come up, whether it's through Congress or whether it's through Senate. And so at least we need to know what is the basis and what is the compromise. And so one of the things that I mentioned on a previous episode is that wording is everything. Language in terms of everything. And so just from a profound introspective, critical thinking standpoint, one of the things that I like about the act is that it is trying to enforce not using the word alien, because that's how immigrants are referred to, illegal aliens, as if they're from another universe, like from Mars or Pluto or Jupiter. They're not human. They don't bleed red. They don't have feelings, nor do they have rights. To changing that word to non-citizen, right? And I think that's important because I believe, just like when you change the word from defendant to Mr. X or Mrs. Y, you bring back some of the humanity that needs to be brought into the matter. So that's one of the things that the act speaks to. The act speaks to also, which has always been on the mind of most immigrants and Cuban immigrants, you name it, is the road to citizenship. How do I get this green card? I came in illegally over 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. I've been working faithfully, paying my taxes, and we know America is a capitalistic country, right? An opportunist, paying my taxes, and I have not been in trouble, and I've been contributing. And I want to contribute in a healthier way. I want to be recognized. I want to bear all the fruits that America has to give. And how do I do that? And so I think the U.S. Citizenship Act kind of tries to expedite that. And so how does it do that?
Well, before you get into that, I want to underscore what you started with.
Yes.
Alien versus non-citizen. I think that's important. My family immigrated from Jamaica, West Indies, and that title, just that in and of itself says a lot about how you see people and how people are viewed. So I don't want that to get lost as you're breaking down what this means. Is language. We've seen a lot of that with all of the different movements and everything that has happened in the last 2 years. But to really think about for a moment, culturally, what that feels like, what that looks like for those who look like us that have certain labels that are put on them. So thank you for highlighting that. And I just wanted to make sure we underscore it before you continue.
Well, I'm very, very, very conscious of that. And Ed knows that, we work as defense counsels. And when you're writing sentencing memorandums for a judge to review, to make a determination of how much time a person is supposed to serve or incarceration, you want to make sure that your audience and your client is humanized, right? And the audience recognize that your client is human. So I think it's always best practices to stay away from adjectives like defendant. Like that seems like an inanimate thing. Alien, it seems like a foreign thing. When you start to use terms like Mr. Russell, Dr. Grant, Mr. Pichardo, then it comes into focus. So yeah, I underscore that point with you. So in looking at what the act is trying to do, so it's trying to speed the path to becoming a green card holder, which is a legal permanent resident. So one of the things that is proposed is that if you're in the country and you're in the country before, I think it's January 1st, 2021, and you've been here consistently, that means you haven't left and came back in, you've been here consistently, and you have no criminal history. You've been here for 5 years, you have no criminal history, you pass a national background check, then you will have a road to become a legal permanent resident. And after 3 years of being a legal permanent resident, then you can apply for citizenship. Now, what is loose about this new act or road to citizenship is that it says you cannot have any criminal background. And criminal goes a long way. You really have to define what criminal mean. Does that mean parking ticket?
Wow.
Does that mean quality of life, right? Summons ticket? Or does that mean misdemeanor, a year or less in jail, or a felony, a year or more in jail? That hasn't been defined. And the reason why that's important is because that's the things that are discussed behind closed doors, right? You hear the announcement on the news, oh yeah, you got to be for 5 years and no criminal contact, no criminal record. And then you start to realize, well, what is the definition of a criminal record, and you can't participate in that discussion.
Oh, okay. Well, what about, you said something key just now. You said contact, and then you said record. So let's say you have the arrest that did not lead to conviction.
Here's the language to that, Ed. It says no criminal history.
Yeah. So
right?
history.
So like let's put our let me put my critical thinking cap on. Click. Turn it up a little bit. Right? I got you, Ed. I'm hearing you. Right now, I hear you. I got your waves. What you're saying is that it's kind of vague. It's kind of, not really defined, right? It's ambiguous, right? So criminal history, criminal contact, criminal conviction. Now, I tend to believe that it'll be criminal convictions because that's the standard that's always been drawn with immigration. However, we're not sure what happens in the back room when you start to compromise and say, all right, I'll give you A, you give me B. 1 for you, 1, 2 for me. Right. And so I think that's a critical point, and we need to be aware of that. But
or let's say that the original arrest charge at the end of the day after the disposition doesn't remain the same. Say deal is cut with the prosecutor. Okay, we're going to go down from a felony to a misdemeanor. We're going to, better yet, down from a misdemeanor to an ordinance violation.
And so, and that's the part that we need to keep our eye on, because when you say criminal history, is an ordinance violation criminal, or is it just a violation and has no criminal ramifications whatsoever?
And I think one of the problems you get into there, right, is let's say you plead down an assault charge to a disorderly conduct. But while you're in front of the judge during the allocution, you're basically agreeing to facts that constituted that original result.
Let me stop you there. I hear what you're saying, but the standard has always been in the world of immigration that the allocution means nothing, is what you're convicted of. Now, that's a cultural tip and a legal tip. You have to be careful as to what you're allocuting to. If the case is being reduced to disorderly conduct, then the allocution, what you admit to in court, if you have to do that, should be surrounded around acts that are disorderly, not the actual top charge, which has been reduced. But these are the things, as I said.
Well, hold on. Let's explain that for somebody who's like, you're talking about allocutions, you're talking about.
Right.
What happens is when you plead guilty to a particular charge, the judge wants to make sure that you are admitting to even that lower charge, and will discuss the facts on the record and will ask whether you agree or not. Some judges will actually make the defendant, state, or the defense attorney state, well, what exactly is it that you're admitting to? In either case, that's what's referred to as the allocution.
And so what we're saying is that when you go to make the factual basis as to what did you do that constitutes your guilt, you should be making that verbal recitation of what you did that made you guilty as to why you're pleading guilty. It should be in line with the actual charge that you are pleading guilty to, which is disorderly conduct. So I was disorderly. And that's why I'm pleading guilty, versus I was charged with the assault. I punched somebody in the eye, but I'm pleading guilty to disorderly conduct. I mean, I've litigated those cases numerous times, and it really boils down to what the conviction is. And that shouldn't change, given that we have a more liberal president and Congress and things of that nature.
And if I may, the reason why I believe Royce is talking about liberal is whenever you get these conservative administrations into office, all of a sudden things get interpreted a little differently.
That's right.
The procedural rules and so forth that the agency operates under get a stricter reading, get certain interpretations, and that's where it becomes really important because because when the application goes in and they have to look at that and they start doing the research. Oh, but wait a minute, you got arrested for this and the disposition says that, and you play, and this is what, and all of that fine tuning starts taking place as to what exactly does that say? What exactly was there a plea? Maybe there was no disposition. All those things become just all the more important.
And it becomes a very important reason why you need to hire an attorney, right? Because if you're stuck there and you're trying to do this pro se and you have a language barrier and you don't know how to distinguish, the whys from the why nots, you can find yourself in a very precarious situation. But the act also speaks to, in this same paragraph, it talks about the Department of Homeland Security, which is INS, Immigration Services, also known as ICE, Immigration Custody and Enforcement, may waive the presence requirement, because remember I told you had to be present prior to January 1st of 2021 for those deported. Hear me out. For those deported, that means you have an order to be removed from the United States on or after January 20th, 2017. So let me reiterate. If you have an order from an immigration judge that says you need to leave the country, and that order happened on or after January 20th, 2017, and you physically remain in the country at least 3 years prior to the removal with a family, not just you alone, with a family. Now, here's another tricky part. Is it your family that comes from another country, or do you have family members in the United States? You can apply for a family unity waiver if other families members are here legally, or for a humanitarian waiver. So if something's going on in your country and you've been here, even though you've been asked to leave, but you stayed, and you've been here prior 3 years before the order even happened, and the order happened after January 20th, 2017, you see where I'm going with this? There's a lot of talking, right? There's a lot of talking going on. A whole lot of talking. That's the whole point. I'm not trying to make sense of it. I'm just letting you know. That's why I'm giving it the way I'm giving it to you. It's just a whole lot of talking. Now, this is a whole lot of talking from, once again, I'm going to use this word, liberal, progressive administration. What I mean by that, this administration is trying to help you. And what I'm giving you is a whole lot of talking. Imagine if it's trying to hurt you. And imagine those who are trying to hurt you or trying to prevent you from getting that benefit. So you can run circles around what the language really means. And once again, as Ed pointed out, you have to be careful. You have to really seek the proper attorney. Two other things I want to talk about before we move ahead, and I'm very mindful of the time because I know we want to talk about some other things, is that the act also expands what a family looks like. And I think that's important. I think those are in power now that are proposing this, is saying, you know what, we don't care about fraud. And I'll tell you how it ties in a second. We don't care about fraud. We want to have the LGBTQ family included. And why do I say fraud and say LGBTQ family? Why do I use that in the same sentence? Because I'm a realist and I've been practicing immigration for over 10, 15 years, right? I mean, there's fraud and everything. People get married for whatever reasons. Some get married for love. Some get married for the bank account. Some get married to stay in the country. Some get married because they have a child. You name it. And it's and pulling back the curtain to figure out why you are actually married is something that immigration tries to do. So fraud, why you are married, motivation to get married, and LGBTQ. How does that all mix it up? I'll shake it up. Popcorn and potato chips in the bag. The bottom is greasy. You put your hand in there, you pull out. What do you pull out? If you have two males that decide that they're going to get married to one another and they're part of the LGBTQ community, who is immigration to say whether or not this is a fraud? But that's their job. Their job is to figure out whether or not that is a fraudulent marriage. So now when you talk about same-sex marriages, although it might be sincere and probably is sincere, this area then does leave itself to fraud, just like any other marriage, right? And when you have a contract between a female and a male, or a male and female, to put a front up to get an immigration benefit by way of marriage, I've seen how those tragically end. I see how those can end very poorly, or how people get exposed. And as an attorney, I always say, I don't want to know the reason why you are married. You come here as a union and we will move forward. But when you talk about same sex, the same fraudulent element can exist, and one would proffer that it probably exists more than not. More than not.
That's interesting, looking at the family unit and the investigation that does go into it. For those that are listening, this is where the legal meets the cultural. So in a lot of our communities, we have a lot of non-citizens who are dealing with this very real immigration issue. And you are reading a lot of words. This is a lot to digest. And some people are hesitant of seeking legal counsel, maybe because of financial capacity or just feeling intimidated. Before you even wrap this portion up, what would you say to someone to empower them in the community? If you know they're having an immigration situation, what other resources are available, including contacting both of you, but what are the resources to help them start to take one bite at the apple and not ignore it because the situation is not going to go away?
Well, the first bite I would say is that they need to communicate with their religious leaders, their community leaders, and not necessarily, your council people or your senators or your assembly. There are those in the community that lead the community that don't hold those positions to have workshops done. There's money out there for these things, to have workshops and bring in somebody that can educate you on what you should and should not do. I know plenty of attorneys, myself included, free consultations on these types of issues. Before you try to file a case, before you try to make a move and proceed in some shape, form, or fashion, get the information. This is one area where information is power. It's similar to the tax code. Tax code changes every year, every minute. No one attorney is going to know everything, but you need to seek out the information. There are charity organizations, or let's say non-for-profit organizations, that you could find through church that work in this area. Even sometimes legal aid, they have attorneys that work in this area where you can get initial information and then build from there. It's all about information. It's all about reading the tea leaves and then coming up with an understanding of what you could do, what you can do, what you shouldn't do, what you should wait on to do before you make a move. And I just say, for those that come in the country under asylum, this act also, an asylum is when you're being persecuted in another country, or in the country that you live in, either for religious or political reasons or religious beliefs, or you trying to escape because there are political beliefs that they're trying to impose on you, and you come to the United States. This act also does away with the 1-year ban. And let me educate everyone that's out there. If you come into this country under an asylum, quote unquote, application, or you are proffering that you want asylum to stay in the United States, you have to do that within your first year of being in the United States, or else you're banned from having that benefit. That's the way the law stands now. What the United States Citizen Act of 2021 states is that there will no longer be a 1-year ban. You come in the country, you want to apply for asylum, and you fail to do that within the first year, for whatever reason you fail to do that, it is still open to you. And to me, that makes sense, because if the circumstances in your country are political, for which you fled, or religious, for which you fled, probably within a year, it'll probably still be the same way, and it only serves to the applicant's disadvantage to prolong the situation and not file, because, as you know, power belief changes over time. So not having that ban allows one to, come in and freely seek that without being under the time pressures of trying to do it within a year, which they probably don't know about in the first place.
Right, because they're still just trying to figure what's what in this.
And one of the things I would say is that definitely maintain control of your paperwork, whatever paperwork that may be generated that's relevant to this process. A lot of times, folks will come to seek help but don't have their paperwork together, their documents together. You're asking them for certain pertinent items and they just don't have them in their possession, and it becomes, a serious problem because you want to have the data you need in front of you in order to be able to give the proper legal advice. So I think that's just a very basic threshold recommendation that, I would offer to anyone in the audience who may know somebody who's dealing with this issue or with an issue that they need help with in this area.
And let me just point out, I know I said one last thing, but this is one last thing on this subject matter, right? What the act does not do, which I'm surprised, it does not give a pathway or any benefit for immigrants that are witnesses to a crime. See, there's a pathway if you're a victim to a crime, domestic violence victim, victim of a robbery. So they got the U's, they got the V's, they got the, the VAWA, VAWA, they have all these other ways. The T for human trafficking. If you're a victim of human trafficking, they're making it easy for you to get a T visa, a U visa if you're a victim of a crime. And if you suffer from some type of domestic violence, you can apply to become a legal permanent resident. But the ball is missed on non-U.S. citizens, immigrants that witness crimes, because they don't want to come forward. Because
and that's very
say something means that you may now leave something. You understand what I mean?
And that's surprising because, during the previous presidential administration, you had people being arrested inside of courthouses based on their, lack of citizenship. And, there were, several folks from the law enforcement community who were like, hold on, wait a minute. This is going to lead to non-citizen immigrants not reporting crimes, either that crimes that they're the victims of, or if you're talking about that next level of cooperation, not just from the victim, but from a witness. I'm not going to come forward to tell you about how I saw so-and-so get murdered or hurt or injured or whatever the case may be if I know that upon,
I'm exposed.
Offering that cooperation, I'm now exposed.
Yes.
I'm walking over to the grand jury to testify. Wait a minute, you mean that I could step out of there and get arrested outside of the courthouse? Are you nuts? I'm not showing up.
Exactly. And so, I'm surprised that they missed that.
And by the way, there's ways to deal with this issue if you're worried about what you were talking about earlier in terms with the fraud, because I would imagine that if the local district attorney needs that person to cooperate as a witness in a particular
that's fraud proof.
Then the documentation is there.
No, that's
so and so has been documented in such and such police report, and they are a cooperating witness in case number such and such.
No, I mean, look,
that
is a bargaining chip and tool that the district attorney can use to their advantage, and U.S. attorney can use to their advantage on any day, and say, look, if you come forward, we will write a letter, we will draft a letter stating that you did this. Now it's up to you to keep that in your coffers, right, in your important paper section, whether you're represented by counsel or not as a witness, because usually in federal court you're assigned an attorney, but in state court you're not. But here it is, you have it, it's yours. You can use it. I'm just hoping that more intelligent minds than mine, when they're in the back room negotiating, somebody, Stacey Placid, we're speaking to you. Somebody says, hey, what about witnesses? What about witnesses? And the reason why I shout her out, because she's a former Bronx district attorney, assistant district attorney. And, she's out there on the world stage representing us and representing us very, very well. So
and maybe maybe we want to my colleague Royce may want to consider possibly writing a letter on this to Congress, to the particular sponsoring legislator, making that suggestion. I mean, I know that the legislation has been drafted, but maybe offer it as a possible amendment.
Oh, well, yeah, maybe I'll get down. I'll put the pen to the paper.
Yeah.
The feet to the metal to the pedal, as they say, right?
Yeah,
Do the do, right?
You can co-author it, Senor Pichardo.
Because you got a lot of juice up in Albany. You can author it.
We're not talking about Albany. We're talking about federal.
This is the second time we're talking about you being an author and stuff.
This
the
is
third
the federal.
time you watch baseball. The third time, brother. You're right. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Well,
Indeed.
This is something, though, definitely for us to really look at, because so many members of our community are in this space of, non-citizen and non-resident. So we can't just hide away from what it is. And I'm really interested to see how this bill moves forward, because it's been a very aggressive agenda for this administration. And I'm really curious to see where everything falls and what will be the final outcome, and if it's something that will be solidified or will change once a new administration comes in.
Whenever I hear you talk about that, what was that favorite? I might be dating myself there, but I know you know that. Conjunction, junction, what's your function? That's right. When a bill becomes a law, you better go back and
yes, I'm a bill.
I'm a bill. That's right. Going up the hill. That's right. So everybody, I can dial back and go look at that one time, so you can really have an understanding. I'm just a bill, only a bill. He was sad because he was a bill. You know what I mean?
But then he gets happy later when he starts moving through committee, and
that's right. There you go. That's what we want to follow right there.
Yeah, that's the become a law.
That's the real culture, right?
I want to become a law.
Only a bill, sitting on Capitol Hill. Yeah, he was lonely.
No.
Oh, yeah, you dated yourself on that one, Mr. Russell. You definitely.
Yeah, well, look. A couple of our listeners will not shout out, but you got Kevin, you got Richard. Ain't nobody pressing
Maria too. I know.
Right. Hey, look.
What I'm talking about.
And you know what I'm talking about, right? You gave me immunity. I'm squealing on everybody. Everybody going to Pelican Bay. I'm putting the book on you, and you. So give it up.
Oh my goodness. Hilarious. But yeah, that was one of my favorite times on Saturday morning.
That's right.
But now that we passed through immigration, to be continued, right? Kevin said, that's right. You definitely remember it, huh, Kevin?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get into another topic that is moving through the media waves. There's a lot happening in Texas. What's really going on with what it means to break quorum, and what you need to know about the Texas House Democrats' dramatic departure? Like, what's going on? Can our legal experts explain what is happening?
I want to see somebody get arrested. Let's see some arrests happen. What we doing? Let's do it.
Well, basically, this surrounds what's recently been going on. There are several conservative states. Go Maria. There's several conservative states around the country where Republican-led legislatures, Republican executives, meaning the governors, are attempting to pass or have passed legislation restricting voting, right? And what do we mean by restricting voting? Ranging from ID laws to restricting amount of polling stations, time when voting can take place, restricting drive-through voting, etc. And I'll talk about some of the issues in Texas.
Early voting as well, right? Trying to do something with early voting a little bit, right?
Yeah, but I'm not too sure. I don't think that's the issue in Texas, though. So basically, let's cut to the chase here. Basically, the Texas legislature is made up of the Texas House of Representatives and the Senate. So the real controversy related to what's currently going on is really taking place within the Texas House. In Texas, it's interesting because in Texas, in order for you to have quorum, what's quorum? Quorum is you have to have a certain amount of members present of that particular body in order to conduct business. Some people are familiar with quorum when it comes to their small committee that they're involved with. Both of you are members of Greek organizations, sorority, fraternity. Whenever you have your meetings and you want to pass a new bylaw or change to something in your rules or procedures, you have to have enough members of the fraternity or sorority present in order for you to do that. If there aren't enough present, then it can't happen. And so you then have to, I guess, table it to the next meeting and start calling folks and say, man, you got to make it to the next meeting, because if you don't, we can't, pass that rule. We're here in Texas, in each one of the bodies, you need a 2/3 majority of members present, not just a majority. In New York State, Senate and Assembly, in order for business to be conducted, except on an appropriations bill, you have to have, and maybe some other certain bills, you have, all you're required to have is a majority of the members present. The problem in Texas is that you need to have a 2/3 majority, and the Texas legislature is made up of 150 members, and there were only 8 of those members present during a recent special session that was called by the governor to pass a number of laws, including laws that are deemed to restrict the vote. One of the most controversial of those is a bill allowing poll watchers, partisan poll watchers, to enter the poll site and be able to directly watch voter activity, except I believe in the booth itself, like right there. But other than that, this poll watcher can follow you around and watch what you're doing and not be prevented from doing so. And the folks in charge of that polling site can get in trouble if they try to prevent this individual from doing this, or if the person being subjected to the observation tries to prevent this individual from being up in their, face, if you will. So, that one is controversial. You also have this, you also have the ID issue where they want you to include the last 4 numbers of your driver's license or social security number when you're voting by mail application, which I would imagine includes the absentee ballot, I would imagine. Right. And anyone who is driving voters to the poll site has to give up this information. All generally, some on the conservative side would say, well, what's the big deal? So what? But all of these are designed to allow for what, the opponents say are intimidation tactics. You also have this bill that the polling site has to have some live stream video of all voter activities, and then some software also to be able to monitor the voting and the count itself. And one of the concerns here, of course, is suppose in certain areas you don't have all of these technological resources. Then what happens? You can't have voting take place, no polls taking place because the damn machine isn't working. They're also trying to eliminate drive-through voting, except I believe if you're disabled, and then again, who deems who's disabled and who's not, and then no overnight voting. Now, I will say that I believe the Democrats were able to defeat an earlier bill that prevented voting on Sundays from taking place, because some churches would, promote voting on a Sunday as part of, what they did on Sundays. And I believe that one was defeated. But, so basically, the majority of the Democratic members in the Texas House left the state because there is a Texas House rule regarding floor procedures. It's called Rule 5, Section 8, which is entitled Securing Quorum. What happens is procedurally is that the majority of the members of that House, after they do a count and find out that there isn't quorum, and start calling the names of those absent, and don't get, say, a call back saying I'm present, and they find out that they don't have quorum, they get to do what's called a call of the House. It's kind of like a, how would I say it? It's a call like, hey, is Representative Royce Russell present? Is Representative Stacey Grant present? They're not present. So then after that, they get to, lock doors. Members can't leave without the permission of the speaker. All these procedures start going into effect. And what happens is if there's an absence with no sufficient excuse as accepted by the majority of the members present, then an order can be sent for, quote, those members can, quote unquote, be sent for and arrested wherever found by the sergeant at arms or an individual empowered and appointed by the sergeant at arms.
So they can use taxpayers' money to go come after me while I'm in the Bronx.
Oh,
Wait. I'm a Democrat. Wait, I'm just listening. I want to make sure I understand this. I'm a Democrat that said I'm not going to sit here. I flee, right? I don't go to the Bahamas. I go back to where my family is. I go back to the Bronx, right? Do you saying the sergeant at arms or somebody who got the arms, whoever's the armed dude, can decide that, hey, look, we're going to go get this person and bring this person back. That takes money to do that. So that's somebody's money. That's why I say taxpayers' money.
Well,
do that, bring me back, and then lock me in the room to make sure I don't leave while we have this thing in session.
Yes and no. Okay, the reason why I
no
said
part of it, no part of it is the ass ain't coming to the Bronx. That's the no part.
Well, yeah, because they don't have jurisdiction outside of the state of Texas.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Okay, so they right now these legislators reportedly are sitting in Washington D.C.
Right, so they're not going to D.C.
Okay, so they don't have authority to go to D.C. and place you under arrest. What they're really talking about is the minute that these legislators return home and step foot off of that plane, they can be subject to arrest. Now, one of the issues that whenever you hear
subject to criminal arrest or subject to political house arrest, it's like
now you're getting into the weeds, brother.
I don't smoke weed. I might be getting into the weed.
I meant like weed, like grass.
Like weed. All right. I'm just saying, bro.
That's what I meant. You get into the thick of it.
All right, go ahead. So now we get the weed.
Now, most legal experts are saying that we're not talking about criminal arrest. These people will not be subject to criminal arrest. What we're talking about here basically is arrest and detain insofar as, you being taken to that House chamber.
You being asked.
No, you being detained. Like, come on, let's go.
Like, wait. Is it like, come on, let's go? Are we putting handcuffs on you?
See, it said, listen, the House.
I want to feather it out. I want to make sure I understand it.
The House rules say arrest. They actually use the term arrest.
Yeah, okay.
Detain. Right. Okay, it uses those specific words. Now, the reason why we're talking about this really is because, first of all, the Texas House, when you're talking about constitutionally, they're a co-equal branch to the executive and the judicial branches of the Texas government, right? They're allowed to have their own rules of procedure. The Senate has their own house.
Right.
And by the way, some of these laws, insofar these laws were passed in the Senate already, because there's apparently the Republicans have a quorum, or conservatives have a quorum proof in the Senate. They just don't have the same in the House.
Right.
And in order for these bills to become law, and some only a bill, right, they need to be voted on by both houses, Senate and House, in order to be taken to the governor for the governor's signature. Governor Greg Abbott, I believe, is his name. So that is the reason why the governor called the special session, and he's like, I'm just going to keep calling these special sessions until they come back. And the minute they come back, we're going to go ahead and do what we got to do. Okay. Now I say co-equal because there are some people arguing that, whoa, wait a minute. Them leaving the state and not subjecting themselves to the authority of the sergeant at arms is in of itself evading or resisting arrest, because they are resisting being arrested. They're evading arrest, right? So under some stretched legal theory that avoids any talk about co-equal branches and whether this even fits into the Texas Penal Code, whether these legislators are actually guilty of a crime that was voted on and that they are subject to. Despite all of that stuff, let's say under some judge who decides that this situation is applicable under the Texas Penal Code, they would only really be subject, except in some extraordinary circumstances, to conviction by Class A misdemeanor, which would subject them to 1 year in jail or a maximum $4,000 fine.
I mean, it sounds a little far-fetched by you when you articulate it, but it's not that far-fetched.
And I'm talking about section
the motives of folks.
I'm talking about section 38.03 and possibly 38.04 of the Texas Penal Code. So, and listen, this is not the first time that the legislators have had to do this. There was a redistricting plan that they disagreed with back in 2003, and they collectively left the state and went up to neighboring Oklahoma. And, they ended up returning, and, I think it got passed anyway.
They got passed.
But listen, them's in Texas, boy, they bowdy. If they don't like what's going on, they say, you know what? We're not going to give you an opportunity to do anything. And they leave and they break out and say, you can't do anything. And I would imagine that what's happening with that 2/3 quorum issue is it probably hasn't. I mean, listen, it probably hasn't been eliminated from those House rules, because I would imagine when things swing and the Dems are running things down there, those Republicans think about that and say, well, we don't want them to be able to do anything without us, So, you probably got that mindset going on, because, I don't understand why they don't look to say, you know what? But also, let's be honest, I would imagine, I would say probably in order for them to change the rules, once again, they're going to need
you're going to need the same quorum. They're going to need the same quorum to do the same thing. So we're going around in the circle.
They need it regardless to even change this thing. But that's basically what's going on, folks. It's disturbing that, in this day and age in 2021, and I guess this happens all over the world, right? If you can't win, by the rules, you got to change the rules, right? Because it comes down to power, right? If the rules don't work for me, then you know what? I'm either gonna avoid them or I'm gonna try to change them. And when they lost, I guess this recent set of elections, they decided, you know what? Forget about this democracy business. We need to stop folks from voting, and that's why progressives, folks on the middle and left, need to just dig in harder and do what they need to do and come out in even more numbers than they did before, despite all these tricks, these Lucky Charm tricks that these conservatives are trying to pull, this
and the vanilla threats. I mean, because I think we're at a stage in our lives, and that is including younger Americans of color, that you want to stand by me and watch me do my thing, and I know what you're trying to do while I'm in the voter board or in the community where I vote or in the room. Go ahead, come on, stand by me. I ain't got no problem letting you know that I'm not voting for you and your people. Like, that's not what I'm doing. Now, if you want to get in the booth, now we got to rumble. Now that's something different. I think that's why they stopped right there. But if you want to follow me around and let's just say somebody's not on my list to vote for, you can follow me around. That intimidation is not working anymore. They can try it, they can put it on paper all they want, but enough is enough. It is not working. Just like the whole Second Amendment, there are folks of color that's just like, you want to do the Second Amendment? Now I'm applying for my Second Amendment. I'm getting my gun too. Everybody join in. And then that's how you see laws change, because once we start joining in, then, oh, no, we can't have that happen. And so they'll be unsuccessful no matter what.
No, it's amazing that you mentioned that. I heard a piece recently talking about, the history in terms of, those gun laws in California when the Panthers started taking advantage of the open carry law that existed at the time of their inception in California, and how all of a sudden, law enforcement got concerned and were able to get a conservative California legislator to put forward, laws preventing that open carry. And of course, they didn't say it was specifically done for the Panthers. Instead, they gave it other names and other labels and other characterizations. And so that's what's happening here with these voter laws. These conservatives are saying, oh, no, we're not trying to stop anybody from voting. What we're trying to do is we're trying to prevent fraud, or we're trying to prevent people who aren't supposed to vote from voting. And then you got the Supreme Court, jumping on the bandwagon.
I want to stop you right there. Everybody, I'm going to tell you right now, once again, you're not going to be able to trademark Ed's Republican voice. That's his Republican voice. That is his intellectual property. When he flips onto the Republican side, I'm telling you now, don't even try to bite. You know what I mean? Haters hate. Don't try to bite. But that's his Republican voice. That is unique to him. Don't try it. But I fully understand and agree with you, Ed. I mean, you said it, and that's all that needs to be said on that.
Yeah, because listen, at the time of poll taxes, at the time of literacy tests, all of these barriers were characterized as things that had to be done simply to make sure that those who have the power of the franchise will use it responsibly, and anyone that's not paying their taxes or anyone that can't read is not going to be able to. And, all of these were, basically being put forth as barriers, artificial barriers, I would say. And that's why, I have to commend the progressives. I have to commend, President Biden for vociferously, objecting to these maneuvers and putting it in the public space, in the public eye. I just hope that, something can really be done here, because, this is really disgraceful. And, that prior administration, when they were able to get these conservative judges onto this bench, they did a real job. And that's why I keep saying, listen, we may have to exercise the nuclear option and start adding, Supreme Court judges.
Oh, no, it's not a nuclear option. It's not a nuclear option. It's progression. It's progression.
Well, people are calling it the nuclear option because they're saying once you start down that path, you're not going to be able to stop it. But hey, if they're going to abuse this restricted number of judges to try to impose upon us these horrible rulings for the next, for our children's lifetimes, because these are relatively young judges that they put onto the bench in recent years. God knows when these people are going to leave, croak, or whatever. You know what I mean?
Well, look, what I say to that is that a number was placed before they got there. We got to this number somehow, and we can get to another number.
Well, they didn't allow the Obama's candidate appointee, a candidate to get a vote, and that.
Well, I mean, every day we do push-ups and sit-ups and get stronger, right? And so we weren't as strong as we were 3, 4, 8, 9 years ago. Now we're a little stronger, and that's how things happen. And we hope that continues. But what brought me to focus on the criminal part of it, which leads into you're talking about, hey, look, this can be a misdemeanor, a year or less. And then we have the insurrection, where people are now starting to have to plead guilty because they're not going to trial, right? For those that don't remember, the insurrection is people storming the Capitol in D.C., where plenty of police officers got hurt.
The attack on the Capitol.
The attack on the capital, most sacred land, the trespass, and then some. And it's interesting that when we talk about a misdemeanor in Texas, and we have charges that are in DC, and some people, at least one person got probation, and now we know someone who has a felony record and they got sentenced to 6 months, right? Time is real. We always wonder whether or not they will be charged with a felony or misdemeanor, but it really doesn't matter because you're going to jail and your history, your criminal history, your record is now catching up with you. Whatever petty offense that you did back in 1918, whatever, 1982, 85, 86, 2020, whatever it was, is now coming to haunt you because you have a prior, which moves the pendulum as to how much time you may have to serve for committing this crime. And in this particular case, 6 months.
Yeah, and I think most folks find 6 months for what was done to be inadequate.
I would agree.
But
we were both on the spectrum of whether or not anything would happen.
Oh yeah, no, listen, absolutely. And for a person with a prior felony record to only get 6 months under these circumstances is disturbing for us because then that is directly going to be used to mitigate and obtain these probationary sentences or even something even less serious than that, and it's just absolutely disturbing because what was done was absolutely egregious. These folks are now crying, saying, well, I was misled, I didn't know. And some are like not even saying that.
No, some of them are arrogant in their way.
Yeah, they're arrogant. They're like, listen,
that's it.
I did what I did, and I should still just get probation.
And under the misconception that they're loyalists and everybody else is wrong. And I just want to repeat what you just said for folks who are listening. If a person had a prior, and I believe this was a prior felony, the person had a prior, and the court in this case sentenced that person to 6 months.
It was
that
max.
Means everybody else that either has a prior felony or has a prior misdemeanor or has no criminal history whatsoever, they are now thinking that their cap, the most amount of time that they would serve once they plead guilty, would be 6 months because of Ned over there or Fred over there, whatever the guy's name is or person name is, received 6 months when that person had a felony. That is the standard. That is the cap. I'd be curious to see if the court deviates from that 6 month period.
Yeah,
and other defendants. And I'm using the word defendant intentionally.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think most people are fine, are being left with a bad taste in their mouth as to what these folks are being allowed to get away with. And now I would imagine it's emboldened the previous president to now, because I recently heard in the news him claiming that he's going to be put back into office by a certain date. And so now you got people saying, oh, well, what does that mean? That means that the movement is still alive.
They're going to try to wait out their case to see if he comes.
Or they may listen, these people are crazy enough to attack the Capitol again or do something else just as crazy because they're being told that there is some movement, some invisible hand out there that's at work against, these so-called unpatriotic individuals who are running the government right now. All of this talk is reminiscent of the Civil War, post-Civil War. You lose and you still feel like you still have power over what's happening in this country, because what you are believing and what you're saying, what you're doing is righteous and patriotic, and no one's going to tell you any different. And during this time, back then, there was very little information except for certain print media. Now we have too much media.
Yes.
We have a number of irresponsible voices, with platforms that are able to spew hate and all other types of misinformation to the feeble-minded, and it's unfortunate and sad. And those on the right side of things are going to have to get right.
That's why we're here, right? To bring the legal and the culture together, and hopefully no one thinks we're feeble-minded or we're catering or have our audience that's feeble-minded. But I must say, Ed, the time has come near, as I used to say on WWRL.
Yes.
6:60 a.m. Speaking legally. Once upon a time, I used to say the time has come near for me to disappear. And so, why don't you give your salutations for today's episode so we can close on out and call it a day?
Yes, indeed. Farewell to everyone. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. For those who are watching as well, I hope you found the information to be fulfilling, educational, as well as spiritually fulfilling.
There we go. That's the term, fulfilling and educational trademark. I got you. We're going to see it on the shirts. It's going to be out there live. This is Royce Russell saying you can catch us next time. Hope to see you next week. Same time, same bad channel. And peace and love to those. Stay aware. All right. Take care.
Peace.
Peace.